Hey makers, it's Jen from Minerva. I'm back today with some really fast dress alterations. I have found over the years, sometimes a simple and subtle alteration can really make the difference in making a ready-to-wear garment look like it's custom made for your body. Things like proportion and ease can turn a garment from to whoa. All right, let's get started.
First up, we have this flowy green and yellow floral dress. This tiered dress has a relaxed fit and this print is gorgeous, but overall, this looks a bit oversized and just feels a little frumpy on me. I could definitely use to bring in the sides, but it also has pockets and I worry about disrupting those by how much I would want to take in those sides by. Instead, I'm going to grab a long piece of thin elastic and I'm just going to tie it around at the waist along that waist seam. Yeah, I can tell already this is going to look a lot better on my body shape. I also think the sleeve hits me in a weird place. Not quite a full length and not 3/4 length either. There's just a simple elastic band which I can easily recreate, so I'm going to take the sleeve up by a few inches. Using a safety pin, I'm going to pin it at the bottom where that fabric is folded over. I prefer to use safety pins when doing alterations because they don't pop out unexpectedly. Since I just tied on the elastic around my waist and it feels pretty comfortable, I'm going to mark either side of that tied area with safety pins so that when I take it off, I can just see how long I need to cut the elastic. All right, and here we have our second contender, dress 2. This dress is gorgeous and doesn't fit all that bad, but at one point it had a waist tie, so it fits a little wide, and I think I want to make it a little more waist defining. It's also a touch too long and not quite at that midi length on me. Okay, just like before, I'm going to use some safety pins and pin in at my sides where I want it to fit the narrowest. It's definitely a bit tricky to fit things on yourself, but again, that's why I love safety pins because they just stay in. Since I'm fitting myself, I like to do a little dance and make sure things are feeling right. As every dress should, there are pockets. Unlike the other dress, my adjustment will be smaller and can be made without disrupting them. The sleeve length feels okay for me, and I even think I prefer this dress with the sleeves rolled up, but if you ever need to adjust the sleeve length, I do have another video tutorial on that, which I've linked below for you. Okay, let's get started on our first dress, where we plan to add elastic to the waist seam and take up the sleeves length. I am going to be using the existing waist seam and sewing our elastic to the seam allowance inside. I recommend using the Prim Super Supple Highly Elastic Tape in the 7mm width available on Minerva's website. This is a braided elastic with high elasticity and a great all-around quality elastic. Using the piece that I tied on previously, I'm going to measure the distance between the safety pins and then cut my elastic to the same length. Making my way to the inside of the dress, I'm going to locate the waist seam. Working with this existing seam allowance, I'm going to stitch on the elastic around the waist, stretching the elastic evenly as I go. Now that I'm at the machine, I'll show you exactly what I mean. First, I want to stitch my elastic into a loop. Placing one end on top of the other, stitch the elastic ends together. Just a few back and forth stitches should do. Also, make sure your elastic isn't twisted. Fold the elastic in half, finding the middle point. Use this midpoint and place it at one of the side seams. Now position it under the machine and take a couple of stitches to tack it down. Now locate the opposite side seam and the overlapped end of the elastic loop and match them together. Pull the elastic until the waist seam is taut. Find a place between that is manageable, placing your fingers there to keep the seam and elastic stretched while you continue stitching. Make sure you aren't catching anything but the seam allowance too. This skirt area was trying to get stuck underneath my seam. You'll want to repeat this all the way around the waist. It's important to check in and use the side seam and that overlapped area of elastic as your halfway mark so that you are stretching the elastic evenly around. You can always pop a few pins in there too if that makes you feel more confident. Once this elastic is attached, I always give this a quick press with the iron, as this process can stretch the elastic out a bit and the heat will always snap it back in. Now it's time to take up this sleeve. I have my safety pin here and I'm going to measure how much I need to take off. From the fold down to the cuff, I'm going to measure with a seam gauge or a ruler. I also want to measure how wide they made the channel for the elastic so I can account for the seam allowance that I'll need to recreate it. I'm planning to just reuse the elastic here, so I'm going to cut into the fabric and remove it. Using some snips, I'm just going to cut around the top edge, making sure I do not cut the elastic inside. Since the bottom was all crinkled from the elastic, I went ahead and pressed the bottom of the sleeve. You can see there's a settled dip to the outside, which adds some billowing to the hem. I need to make this sleeve about 4.5 inches shorter, but adding back in 3/4 of an inch to allow for my double turn casing for the elastic. So I'm going to use my seam gauge, moving the marker to about 3 3/4 inch. Then using some tailor's chalk, I'm going to mark across the bottom of the sleeve using the existing curved line. Making sure the sleeve is lined up, use a rotary blade or scissors to cut off the end of the sleeve. I'm going to hop over to the iron and press the hem for the elastic casing. I'm going to do this by just turning back the edge twice by 3/8 of an inch. Just like the waist elastic, I want to tack my sleeve elastic in a loop. I've pressed my casing allowance and now it's time to put the elastic in and sew the casing all at the same time. Put the elastic within the folded area. Place it under the machine and stitch along the top edge of the fold. You are only sewing through the fabric here, not the elastic. Continue stitching around and shifting the elastic as you go. And there you have it, sewn all in one step. Okay, this dress is done. See how quick that was? All right, on to the next dress. For dress 2, I wanted to take in the side seams from the underarm area to the waist and pockets. You can see this dress originally had some sort of belt that it's long gone. Since I don't plan to use these loops, I'm just going to cut them off. At the safety pin, I'm going to measure over to the side seam to see how much I want to take this dress in. Then I'm going to check the other side because it might be slightly different. If there's a really big discrepancy in between the two sides, I like to add the two amounts together and split them for the adjustment amount. This one was different by about 1/4 of an inch, but since I feel confident that I can go a little bigger with my adjustment, I'm choosing to take each side seam in by 1 inch. Moving my way to the inside of the dress, I'm going to use some tailor's chalk and just mark where those safety pins are. This way, I know approximately where the narrowest part of this adjustment should be. Taking the safety pins out, I can see both my marks on either side of the dress seam. Let's check it out on the machine. I have one of the side seams, and starting at the pocket opening, I'm going to stitch along the side seam. I'm going to angle into that chalk mark by the allotted 1-inch adjustment. Then I'll angle back out to meet the existing side seam of the underarm area. And that's as easy as it gets. Now for the hem, this dress just has a 1/4-inch double turned hem, which is very easy to recreate. It does have some corners, which I know can be tricky, but I'll show you a little trick to help with that. I decided I would take up the hem by 2.5 inches, which means I need to trim off 2 inches to include some seam allowance. Since this is a wider double turned hem, we can totally do this all in one step because you know I like to make things faster. I'm just going to get it started with folding the end twice and placing it under the machine. Giving it a few stitches to get things secure, I'll continue to fold the fabric back so that it rolls in on itself. That way I can keep stitching until I reach the other side. It helps to keep your fabric pretty taut, but not so tight that you are stretching it out. Occasionally, your fabric likes to be a little pesky, so using tweezers or scissors to push it back in can totally help. And how do we make those good double rolled corners? Well, when you get close to that end, fold the last little bit of your edge inwards at a 45-degree angle. Then continue to roll that fabric as usual and then stitch across. You can also use a rolled hem foot attachment. The trick to starting with a rolled hem foot is stitching across the initial corner at a 45-degree angle. Those tail threads help to guide you. Fold the first little bit back and pull the fabric through using those tail threads so that the fabric is properly rolling through the foot. Then just start stitching. I do find I still help guide the fabric to roll properly using the foot, but it makes really fast work of a rolled hem. Again, at the corner, fold it in at a 45-degree angle and then stitch over. Now we just need to give these a quick press and they're good to go. And here's dress 2. This is definitely showing off how a subtle alteration can really make a garment look so much better. Did you think I was going to let you go before giving you a proper before and after? No way. Here's dress 1. Holy moly, what a difference. All I did was take 5 minutes to add some elastic to the waistband and then take up the sleeves about 4 inches. This fits my figure so much better and feels really flattering. And then dress 2, the length and slight bagginess to this dress was feeling a bit out of proportion. Just remember, small changes can be fast and easy, and they really do make all the difference. Thanks for watching, and I'll sew with you next time.